All right, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is your Tuesday end of day recap and option flow recap. So we have another strong day on our hands. It just continues, great continuation, and I'm going to just talk about the overall option flow that we're seeing, which is kind of been very nice because it's really kept a lot of us in the game. I mean, otherwise, I think I would have moved to cash or had a bigger cash position at this point with the S&P so overbought. We're still continuing on this swing here, and it's been really outstanding in terms of the performance in January. And Nasdaq even more so. Nasdaq got more of a boost, and that had the strength today. The Qs or Nasdaq futures finished up another 40 basis points. You notice that the RSI, which I've been saying every day now for a few days, very overbought, 82, and that's also happening globally. So, I made reference to this pre-market. The China ETF is, or if you go to the Hang Seng Index, really, because that's where the equities are originating from in the FXI ETF. The Hang Seng is up, I think, 22 out of 24 days, and that's going back to December 18th. What is that performance since December 18th? About 15%. Actually, I'm sorry, I think it's up 18%. So if you think that we are sizzling hot, we are. But you look at some of these other areas around the globe, and they are outpacing us. Again, FXI, I believe it. Again, I'm going from memory, but I believe it's up 18%. You don't want to know what the S&P is from the same time period, December 18th, up 6%. So yeah, that's a really good performance. But these other areas around the globe are outpacing us. And again, I mention this a lot, and I bring attention to it a lot because you turn on financial media and they talk about single names. They only talk about the US. They talk about the implications of the tax bill. They talk about the government shutdown, but they don't talk about what the rest of the world is doing, and it's super strong. All right, so really, I mean, look at the RSI on the FXI ETF. I was actually looking. I'm like, this thing at this point has to come in a bit. It's an 87 RSI, relative strength index. Again, these things can only get to 100. So it is really, it's been the most overbought I think that I've ever seen it before. Just amazing strength. And I was going to go ahead and look to do a trade, look to possibly do some type of reversion trade, maybe buy a little bit of puts in FXI, which I still don't think is a bad idea. But look at the monster trades that we're seeing that hit the tape today. It appears that someone bought a call spread in FXI. Again, the China ETF, what I have up in front of you. They bought the March 53, 55 call spread, and they sold the 50 puts. So really aggressive. And then they did the same thing with the EM ETF as well, which is also, if we bring up the chart of EM, I talk about these first because these are really big trades that went up. So I mean, this one is super overbought. So this is 79 RSI. So I can't buy these up here. I've been long, and I have an overweight position in emerging markets. That's why I'm a little worried about how overheated they're getting, because I've been overweight emerging markets now since, for months, actually since the beginning of March, I would say, of last year. So it has been just a colossal great trade that I've had on. But I always worry first about what could happen to the downside. Emerging markets EM I put on March 20th. I'm also long MCHI. I'm also long a couple individual names in China as well, and that's my cash. That's the cash trend portfolio with which all TTG members have access to, and they see real-time entries and exits, as well as any adjustments as well. So those are some monster trades. So it's really tough to say, hey, I'm going to put on a reversion trade and look for a little bit of a pullback here when we see these monster trades. This EEM was the 51-53 call spread, and they're selling puts in this one as well at 66 cents. So go figure. All right, so today's performance, biotech had some continuation. XBI, Monster, again, a lot of small cap names in this one. So full out breakout in the biotech, the small cap, not small cap, but equally weighted biotech ETF. And names like GBT, which have been big winners. GBT continues to go higher. That's a position I have in cash. Fold, also I'm long. Fold both in cash and in options as well. And that one also just hit, I believe, a 52-week high as well. And that's a story. I can go through a bunch of individual names in biotech, but they're really showing some signs of strength. And I think a lot of people who are specialists in that space have been welcoming this and have been very patient, waiting for biotech to go ahead and break out like it is. And then you have kind of a hodgepodge of other groups. So that was your best performer, but you have the Chinese internets, which were up 1%. As I mentioned, the Hang Seng has been strong. You have FDN, which I call my FANG proxy. Because the biggest weights of this ETF are the FANG stocks, of course. So Netflix had a big day, but so did Amazon. And again, it's hard to really find a lot of areas that exude or have weakness. A couple of them today, like U.S. Steel, just battled all the way back. The steel names were weak early. The XME ETF was down 2% to start the day. And look at this thing go. Really strong from lows to highs. A couple traders picked up on this. We have a couple really good traders who play U.S. Steel quite frequently, and they bought it on the lows. Of course, there was call buying in this. I was chuckling. I actually put it out on Twitter as well because, after it already went from 38, 35 to, basically about almost to $40, then a call buyer comes in close to the highs of the session. And, that's the value that we add in our trading room is we don't necessarily need to see once you're in the trade and you see a call buyer, that's great. It's got the momentum. Sometimes I do get in when we see the call buying on the tape, but a lot of times we get into trades where the setup is really good. Before anybody starts tweeting about them, like, oh my God, there's a call buyer in U.S. Steel. Well, we get into these trades before most do because we realize that they're good setups. Just as the people who are trading them on the tape, when you see an aggressive call buyer, they're a lot of times realizing the same thing that you are, that a name reversed and is moving up. So you can get into these trades for earlier than when you see the call buying in. Before I go into other moves, the rest, I would say sector performance, just a lot of green. Even the small caps, which were down most of the day, came back and finished up 30 basis points. Just a few areas that finished down. The base metals, copper actually finished down, was very weak throughout the session. Let me just bring up the copper chart, which is, kind of weird because we've been seeing a lot of call buying in FCX the last couple of days, but they could be earnings related. They report earnings this week. You could see copper. So this kind of worries me a little bit, right? Copper moving down 2.5%. It held the support for a little while, but not only did it break into the value area, but it also broke the 50-day moving average. So is it the end of the world? No, I don't think so. It's still very much in an uptrend. It broke below the 50-day moving average about 2 months ago, and it managed to recapture it pretty well. Really your trend line is the 200-day moving average, but would like to see this get back above the 50-day moving average. I think FCX did recover a bit. Speaking of that name, you could see a hammer bar in an uptrend for FCX. But I want to get to where I'm really excited for the day. What I think is the biggest move of the day, or one of the biggest moves of the day, is nat gas. This has been, for a while I was saying this in the trading room, that this was making lower lows and lower highs all the way through here. And then it reversed. It got to the 50-day moving average, had a big green candle, did a little bit of price digestion, and look at this above the 200-day moving average. And the white line is the 200-day moving average. This opens up a world of possibilities. We took advantage of that. We noticed the strength pre-market. So I said, hey, I'm looking for names like Devon Energy, COG, and what did we see? By the way, so FCG is your nat gas company ETF. So you could play that if you want to own the whole group, you could do it through this ETF. FCG, Frank, Charlie, George. What we saw was LNG calls, and man, this was an awesome trade today. So LNG, I was able to hit 3 targets in this trade already, and then now I'm holding the balance. So that's a perfect scenario where I'm holding on to the runner after hitting 3 targets. But I think we saw some Devon calls yesterday. I think COG looks interesting. Just didn't close on the highs, but above the 50-day moving average. DVN is another name that I'm tempted in. And then we also saw call buying in names like Exxon today. Exxon saw some really nice call buying as well. If I just bring up today's aggressive trades, you could see a lot of March calls going up, a lot of April calls going up as well. A little bit of puts going up there as well, but I think the calls outweigh the puts. And then another name, it seems like almost every day we see a very small, small cap energy names see aggressive call activity. Today, I would say it was AR, Antero Resources. Take a look at all the trades that hit today in AR. Again, just looking at the sweeps, the most aggressive trades, you could see it traded 7 times normal volume. Look at the Feb calls they bought. First, they bought the May calls. This was around 10:30. So apparently, somebody really likes this name. May calls a couple times hit, and you could see here, and then at the end of the day, some February calls. This name reports 227. But again, if you're looking from a pure technical standpoint, it's above the 200-day moving average, and it's a low price stock. So this name sets up really nicely to go long versus that 200-day moving average and see what it does here. But a name that's been in a downtrend for a long time, call buyers coming in, and you have the pass now. It's above the 200-day moving average. So and then there's other names, a whole another area of names. CVE, which is another energy name, seeing more call buying. This is one that we've seen in the past, but again, I would put that in the group of small cap buying. All right, so besides, I've got a whole list just like yesterday. It spills over to two pages. Whenever that happens, it shows you the risk appetite that we're seeing on the tape. It's huge. So a couple of repeaters, FBHS, I don't know what they're up to that name in that name. Mattel, I should talk about that name as well. All kinds of call buying in this name last week, and this thing popped, went all the way up and a little bit further to the 200-day moving average. Big winner in the Tribeca Trade Group room. I wasn't going to take this trade. Bunch of members said, "Hey, I'm taking it." I said, "Okay, I'll take it as well." And I think most of us got into some calls. This week's calls that we put on, I think Thursday or Friday of last week for about 35 cents. And people were out of them today at around $2. So, just amazing. And they bought more Mattel yesterday, and they bought more Mattel this morning as well. And along those lines of names that popped, this is another name that we've seen call buying multiple times. Micro Semi announced that they may go ahead and put themselves up for sale. And again, an aggressive call buyer right before the announcement today. But we started seeing that call buying, I would say, probably about a month and a half ago. Somewhere in that range for MSCC. Few other names to go through, and again, there's just a lot of them. There's more material buying, VMC, LMM, and it's tough. A lot of these trades are February trades. They've got earnings around them, so you really have to kind of pick and choose. Some of the semi names were strong. Micron, also another setup that I'm looking at. Again, there's just a lot of names. Did Micron closed above the value area, did not close above the 50-day moving average. So almost there was a weekly call buyer in there as well. Have to watch that name. For me, has to close back above the 50-day moving average to take a sizable trade. I've got a small position out in January, but I'm waiting to put on a bigger position, and I'm waiting for a little bit of confirmation. ILG, this is another name that we saw call buying last week. Big block goes up. You can see my downward trend line. Price is now over that. So there's your buy signal as well in ILG. Weyerhaeuser saw some calls. GM saw some calls. I think the chart in GM looks fine to get involved in. Leap, so January 2019, 45 calls that went up. Some call buying in Gold Corp as well. So mentioned. Newmont is another name that I've been long. So this was the tale of two gold miners. And I'll talk about some of the trades that I did in a second. But Newmont is a trade that I've had on for now a couple weeks. Broke out of that downward trend line and has been moving up in a nice day today. Fortunately, this was my disaster today. This name had some results out about a gold mine, I guess, that were not as high as expectations. Name fell down 26% if we saw repeat call buying. So just makes you, this is good to put in perspective. I talked about this in the trading room a few times because I want traders to know that every time we see aggressive call buying on the tape, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to pan out every time, right? There's nothing that's 100% that's going to work every time. So I want to make sure I talk about the losers and the winners. But if your portfolio is set up correctly, you could have one of these, which, if you were long this, provided a pretty big ding. It was down $900 right off the bat, but I have got a bunch of, it's in a portfolio and it's not an outsized position. So, that's the way that you play to win the game, right? So that's the way that you have to be diversified, so that you can be able to sustain something like this when a name gets smoked like this, and to still have your P&L up on the day. What did we do today in the trading room? LNG I mentioned, we got into, and for 183, and I was hitting targets up at 265. Baba, we caught this one we talked about, and again, this is what we do in the trading room every morning to get ready for the day. But Baba was the number one name on my watch list. I took it right off the bat today. It was, again, weird to see, and I don't fully understand it, but it gives you an opportunity. The first 5-minute bar was down on the day, and once I saw a little bit of green, I went in. So you kind of knew that Baba was going to take off. It was just a matter of time. But I got into some calls for right around $1, sold them out at $1.50. The name pulled back a little bit with something on the tape, I think, that caused us to sell off a little bit. I put the position back on at $1.10, and I was able to take the position off at above $2. I think $2.40 was my last target. And then I did what you should do trading. You take your profits and you roll them out a little bit further. So I put on a little bit of a swing trade, and that trade worked out really well. So that was nice because I was able to kind of recoup all those losses pretty quickly with that PBG trade. Besides that, even if I didn't take that trade, there was a number of other trades that worked out really well. HGTM, which this is a small cap biotech name that we got involved in. I mentioned Fold, a couple other trades, Newmont. So a really nice day today. And again, I'm not over trading this market up here. I think the trades that I have on are working great. I don't need to fuss around and take every time I see green to take the trade off. I'm riding the trend up, and we want to go, again, looking at this and trying to time, go back to the S&P chart, trying to time when this is going to break is a fool's game. No one is going to be able to tell you that when the reversal day is going to come. What's going to tell you? Price is going to tell you. So yeah, eventually when this cracks, you're going to have a little bit of a dip in your P&L, and you could do things, of course, to manage. You could be taking profits, but getting out of positions, if the market ends up again tomorrow, then you're not going to have any profits for when that happens. So, when something gets broken here, when a trend line gets broken, that yellow line, I think 5-period exponential moving average, that's when the game is over. But until then, I've said this expression before, but party on, keep your positions, but manage them appropriately, take some targets off when things get really overbought, but you have to have some skin in the game in order to profit from this exceptional move. All right, so that's today's recap. Thank you for watching, and you can check us out at tribecatradegroup.com. Thanks, and have a great night.